It's Momo Mondays, your weekly dose of adorableness and motivation. And you know what to do. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out. And now that we've centered ourselves, I want to talk, hopefully briefly, famous last words, Leanna, about accepting the status quo versus not giving up. And this is, again, a lesson taught to me by Momo. Because Momo, as you know, has been struggling with some health issues. He's finally doing better. And it was because I didn't listen to the assertions from a particular vet that he just needed to ride out the sickness. And I realized this is such a metaphor for so many other things. Being told to just ride it out. There's nothing you can do. It's just, this is the way it is. It's just going to be miserable. And they said this about a cat who had such a snotty nose, he couldn't lie on his back without choking, and was, had such itchy eyes that he was scratching the fur off his face. And a vet said, just settle for that. This is the best we can do. Needless to say, we're not seeing that vet anymore, because that's the kind of thinking that I had to disabuse myself of when I went through PTSD therapy. The idea that this is just your life. There's nothing you can do about it. People just can beat on you. You can't protect yourself. And it was a real wake-up call, realizing that that's not the case, that you don't have to. And there are consequences to every choice, no doubt. But this is why I think it's really important to care for things, to have things and, whatever it is that you care about in a nurturing way, not in a screaming way, in a, gentle, warm kind of way. Because I was not going to sit there and watch my cat keep scratching off the fur on his face. I mean, everybody loves Momo, right? Momo's awesome. He deserves better. And so we went to another vet, and, I did that thing that doctors are all, internet diagnosis, but it gave us some options. And, it's exhausting because it's having to overcome all my introvert tendencies, which is don't say anything, don't be a bother, try to be as invisible as possible, because just people can be really overwhelming to introverted people. And so I, had to overcome that, had to speak up. And sometimes you can't get through to a particular person. You have to go somewhere else or to someone else. And that's what we did. And, the other vet, who's the vet that owns the clinic, who we've been going to for years and years and years, he was more open. And that wouldn't happen. He'd still be walking around miserable and snotty if we'd listened to that first vet who told us he's just got to ride it out. And I see so many people on the internet, and I am desperately trying to get better at it myself for my own good. There are a lot of people on the internet who believe they just have to ride it out on a lot of different counts. There's a lot of people I see in jobs they absolutely can't stand, and they think they just have to ride it out. And I know from experience, there are times you just hit, you're like, I'm wasting my life. I'm wasting my life. I'm not happy. I'm not fun to be around. I'm not helpful or useful to anybody around me, because I am so beaten down by this situation that I think I have to be in. And the reality is that there are very few situations that you have to be in. If you're in a job you hate because it's better than unemployment, well, accept that choice. But the reality is you can quit. It's not necessarily an awesome choice, but it is a choice. And, in terms of these various internet echo chambers, I know it's easier said than done, but you don't have to be a part of those groups if there are things about them that you find, in your gut disturbing. I'm not talking about, the occasional thing that you're like, I'd prefer they didn't do that. I'm talking about, stuff that you feel wrong passively participating in. The people who are really your friends, the people you connect with, are going to stay in touch with you. And sometimes people fall out of touch and it's no one's fault. And I know if you guys are anything like me, it's, again, introvert thing. Making friends in the first place isn't necessarily the easiest thing. And personally, for me, I have a very high bar of who I consider a friend. People who I talk to regularly are colleagues. They're not necessarily friends. A friend is somebody you can disagree with, even fight with occasionally, and you don't stop talking to each other. You have a relationship that can weather that, is stronger than that. That's what friendship is to me. And too many people, I mean, this is one thing I had to learn in trauma therapy, is sometimes you get into situations in life where your friends are not your friends, or authority figures do not have what's in your best interests at heart. Like in the case of this vet, this was just meh, next patient. And unfortunately, with even human medicine, that sort of thing happens far too often. But it was really hard for me to recognize that the people around me weren't good for me. And it was a very lonely period pulling away from that, because a lot of things came with it. And change is hard. Change is really hard. I'm not going to deny that. But sometimes hard things are necessary. Now, the big question is, how do you know? And that is the $1 million question, isn't it? How do you know when to stay and when to go? And that was a really hard thing for me, because I was sort of laboring under that, nerd fallacy, for lack of a better term, of exclude no one. People who play video games and read comic books and everything like that, we tend to feel excluded because we were treated like we were diseases instead of people at a lot of times. And it can make us reactive in ways that other people have trouble understanding sometimes. And so this idea of cutting people off because they weren't good for me was very hard, but I had to do it, because what was happening is that the people around me were keeping me stuck in the post-traumatic state. They were undermining my ability to do things, to reorganize my life, to get the feeling of control back, to get away from that idea that specific, triggers are linked to something bad happening. And it, in many ways, was a good learning experience. And that sounds really, it sounds like a platitude, right? I won't say it was the best thing that ever happened to me, because no, it wasn't. It sucked. But it was a good learning experience. It made me better. And it made me more, I won't say sympathetic. I won't say it's empathy. It's understanding of other people's struggles, and understanding that the stupid motivations, if you can do anything you want and you just have to try harder and all that stuff. I'll go back to the comment I love from Feedback Friday. Sometimes it's not about trying harder. Sometimes it's about trying differently, finding another way to approach things. And that's what it's all about. If you keep just, listening to that authority figure, whether it's in your own head or from something outside, that just tells you this is it. This is the best that you can expect. And you don't think it's good enough. Something in you tells you, no, you deserve better. Listen to that. Now, the difficult part is, what do you do about it? And all I can really say, based on my own experiences, is you have to do the thing that feels right, not the thing that feels easy, and you have to be consistent about it. And I think too many people are too cowed by these appeals to authority, and they disregard their own worth as a result. And I think that people being sick of that explains some of this wave of populism that's consuming the world. And because even up in Canada here, Trudeau in his own way is a populist. He's just a smiley populist as opposed to a pouty duck face populist. But people need to feel like they have a certain control over their lives. And I know when you're fighting for control, you don't particularly care if you're nice some of the time. I get that because it feels like a fight for survival. And there's a lot of people that have never had to encounter that. They are fortunate in some ways. But part of success is overcoming adversity. As unpleasant as that is, you have to know when to hold them and know when to fold them, like the gambler says. Giving up on things that aren't working is part of success. But before you give up on something, figure out what you're holding on to through that sacrifice. You're giving up on this to pursue what? That's what I've found works, because then you don't feel adrift. And for me, it's Momo and the fuzzy, chubby little wisdom that he imparts with every hug. 95% of everything is not going to be relevant to someone else who's struggling, but that 5% that is may be what clicks for them. If one thing clicks for one person, then it's all worth it. But we can't get that one thing unless we communicate, which is why I am so personally concerned about this climate on the internet of shut up, go away. Blocks are like a form of internet currency. Echo chambers, dislike buttons, like button. It's all stripping us of our empowerment to have an individualized opinion, isn't it? And it's hard to fight it. It's hard to fight it. Some days I would absolutely love to have these, energized activist echo chamber bases that get me, an immediate 50,000 hits on YouTube and all that stuff. But that sort of easy popularity is what I chose to give up, what I chose to sacrifice to do content that I am confident actually helps people who don't have a community. And yeah, it's a harder road. It's a less financially lucrative road. But it's the one that makes me feel good instead of making me feel like I have no control. At least at the end of it all, the Gamer Ghazi and the Crash Override types may have successfully succeeded in just completely destroying my career. I may never have a real platform in the video game industry again. It's possible, but I'm trying. And yeah, the GG Revolt types may have effectively, convinced many people that I'm crazy and an ex-stripper and all this stuff, but people will eventually forget that. There's there's nothing I can do about those things. There are things I can do about how I choose to process what happens to me. And does it feel fair? No, it feels completely unfair. I can't change the entire, games journalism thing the same way I can't take away the chronic condition that Momo has. But I can create the best quality of life that is possible. And you can't do that if you just give up. And sometimes it's hard. I mean, God, I'll tell you, when he was sick for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and I was being told there's nothing we can do, it was really hard. It was really scary, and it felt really helpless. And I don't know the answer. I don't know the easy thing to tell somebody about how you get through that, other than trying does matter. And so I would love the gaming industry to become less fixated on mistakes. Mistakes are a part of innovation. I can't make that happen myself. I can make that a driving ideology of the coverage I provide you guys. And I'll leave that there. I hope you found that useful, at the very least in a sort of you're not alone kind of way. I wish I had better answers, but it's so personal that it really is about what works for you. And if anybody else would like to share their stories about what works for you, I would love to be a part of that. If anybody wants to come on and talk about what works for them, I'm more than happy to do that. We can do just audio, so you don't have to show your face, all that stuff. But offer stands. And let's leave it there. We'll do our breathing to close out. Breathe in. And out. And breathe in. And out.